The world's biggest automaker, VW, is facing yet more problems. It's been revealed that 3.6 million Volkswagen cars will require changes to their hardware. And Hillary Clinton fires a warning shot across the bow of Wall Street. The US presidential candidate wants to force banking executives to share fines imposed on their institutions. Hello and welcome to World Business Report. I'm Victoria Fritz. In a minute, we're going to be hearing what the head of the IMF thinks about the current slowdown in the Chinese economy. But first, it's being reported that 3.6 million VW cars in Europe will need hardware changes, in particular the cars that have 1.6-litre engines. That's according to Germany's Transport Ministry. Earlier this week, we found out that Volkswagen plans to start the recall of affected vehicles in January. The company hopes that all repairs will be completed by the end of 2016. Speaking a little earlier, Damien McGuinness gave us this update on the story.
This is really problematic, the fact that so many cars, more than 3.5 million, as you say, will require hardware changes, because there were two alternatives for the fix, and that would be either a software update, which would be relatively low impact on the vehicle, or hardware changes. Now, hardware changes, that could be something quite major, as we heard yesterday when Michael Horn, the US boss, testified in front of a congressional committee in Washington. He said that sometimes these hardware changes could mean even fitting in a new tank. The problem is that there are big questions over whether such an intrusive update of the car or intrusive fix of the car could impact on, firstly, performance of the car, and secondly, fuel efficiency, or even on the value of the car if car owners want to resell. So these are all questions which yesterday were thrown at the boss of VW in the US by very angry members of Congress, and the fact that now the hardware changes will have to be made in Europe is really bad news for millions of car owners here in Europe.
Now, the head of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, has said that the outlook for China's economy is not all doom and gloom. It's a story of deceleration. The Chinese government is expecting growth to slow to 7% this year. The IMF is a little bit more pessimistic, predicting growth of 6.8%. The BBC's Michelle Fleury caught up with Christine Lagarde and asked her how well China is managing its transition from an export-led to a consumer-led economy.
We are very supportive of the transition that is taking place at the moment, and very supportive of the market determination when it comes to exchange rate, when it comes to interest rate. Very supportive in terms of moving away from the from the investment-led growth model to a much more consumption-driven growth model. And we believe that these transitions will take place over the course of time under Chinese leadership at their own pace, with their own tools, and we are very much available to help and support that movement with appropriate communication, which will improve over the course of time, because you don't move just overnight from being heavily controlled to being market determined, with massive market expectations that suddenly the situations should be the same across the world. It just doesn't happen that way.
Now, the US presidential candidate Hillary Clinton has outlined her plan to curb Wall Street abuses. Her proposals include harsher penalties for executives, including forcing them to foot some of the bill when it comes to fines imposed against their institutions. The former Secretary of State said there was still too much risk in the financial system. Too big to fail is still too big a problem, according to Mrs. Clinton. Let's speak now to Samira Hussain, who's on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange for us. Samira, the heart of this, it's accountability, but how radical are her plans?
Well, not all that radical. She is still not as left-leaning as some of her colleagues may have wanted her to be. For example, Bernie Sanders, another Democratic presidential hopeful who's running for the nomination for the Democratic Party, has gone even further towards the left, really being very vocal and critical of Wall Street. you know, the challenge, of course, for Hillary Clinton is that a lot of her donors are, in fact, people who work on Wall Street, who are tied to the financial system here. And so it is a bit of a challenge for her to sort of be hard on Wall Street while still trying to, you know, play the dollars and cents game in terms of donors.
How has the banking community where you are received her plan?
Well, it didn't get a lot of attention throughout the day because many people recognize it as political sort of posturing. Of course, the challenge again for her is going to be how she presents it to the people from whom she's getting money from, in terms of her donors, but also in terms of her political base. She wants to show her base that she is moving towards the left, that she is going to be tough on Wall Street, and that she is going to be tough in terms of for people who are accused of wrongdoing and who are shown to be doing something wrong, they actually face fines and penalties.
Samira, thank you very much. I'm sure you're going to be across that story for us in the future. Samira Hussain in New York for us. Now, more on that 3.6 million VW cars in Europe that will need hardware changes. We are joined now by Jim Holder, who is the editorial director, just hit my chair there, of What Car and Autocar magazines. Thank you very much for coming in. Can you please explain to me what these hardware changes actually involve?
Yeah, so we're not actually clear yet. Volkswagen have to explain it fully, but we suspect it could be sort of one of three things. Either new fuel injection valves, changes to the catalytic converter, or fitting a tank of the urea treatment liquid that will make the cars cleaner when they're running.
Now that all sounds quite complicated. It also sounds like it's going to take a lot of time. What impact is this going to have on performance, let's say, of the cars, and also the costs for drivers?
Absolutely. So at the moment, Volkswagen aren't saying, but our suspicion is that it will affect top speed of the vehicles, but it may not affect other performance figures. So they're suggesting just a few miles per hour lower top speeds, which wouldn't be a bad thing. You know, the top speeds of these cars are well above the national limits. For costs for owners, already the British government has said they will carry any cost. There won't be anything impacting on the owners of the vehicles. So it shouldn't be too great. But obviously there is the problem of getting the cars fixed, and that is a time-consuming process.
It is a time-consuming process. I mean, also there's this issue going on, the corporate culture of VW, and very much under the spotlight at the moment. What we've heard yesterday in the congressional hearing, what does that suggest about the internal culture at VW?
Yeah, I think it suggests it was pretty rotten, actually. They've already made some pretty sweeping changes, and they've talked a lot about having to change the way they worked, the way they operated, particularly at the top of the company. And the fact they've made those changes so quickly suggests they knew there was a problem, and they're trying to change it as quickly as they can.
Do you think there is a chance that senior executives might have deliberately turned a blind eye to what they say was going on with a very few numbers of people over in Germany?
Yeah, I think it's very likely. I think we saw yesterday at the congressional hearing there was a suggestion it was just a couple of software engineers. I don't really buy that. I think we've already heard there are suspensions at the top of the company as a result of this, and investigations ongoing. And it's hard to believe that a company led by engineers wouldn't have understood the implications of what was going on.
It does seem very hard to believe. Jim Holder, thank you very much for coming in and taking us through those developments. Now, of course, there's plenty more on the business website when it comes to lots of business news. And of course, you can contact us on Twitter as well. I'm at VFritzNews. That was World Business Report. Have a very good weekend.